Nothing says midlife crisis quite like catching your husband wrapped around your son's girlfriend's mother. Especially while you're stranded on Main Street beside a lifeless Subaru. It takes real talent to ruin both a marriage and a child's relationship in a single afternoon, but apparently my husband was nothing if not efficient. My allegedly dependable Subaru decided to surrender to mechanical death right in front of the spotless glass of Oakmont Plaza in downtown Hartford. Sitting on the curb, I looked like a rejected extra from a sad music video, mascara streaking, phone in hand, calling the tow company. "We'll be there in approximately 45 minutes, ma'am," the dispatcher said, which in tow truck language translates to, "Could be soon, could be never." Halfway through my third round of mindless phone solitaire, the revolving doors spun, and out stepped my husband of 19 years. Grant Caldwell, financial advisor, father of our son, and apparently an Olympic-level cheat, had his arm draped around the waist of a woman whose blonde bob I recognized instantly. Vanessa Pierce, mother of Lila. Yes, that Lila, the one dating our son Evan. The same Vanessa who once mocked my cranberry sauce at Thanksgiving, announcing it had that jiggle that only comes from a can. As Grant's hand slid lower on Vanessa's pencil skirt, I sat frozen behind my dead car, still in the blazer I'd worn to my marketing meeting earlier. Then a stroke of either brilliance or madness struck. In one smooth motion I lifted my phone, angled it perfectly so that my shocked face filled the foreground and their cozy little betrayal occupied the background. A quick filter to hide my raccoon eyes, and I hit send to our family group chat with the caption, "Look who I caught planning the surprise engagement party." For context, there was no engagement. Evan and Lila were 18-year-old college freshmen, dating for 8 months at best. My phone immediately detonated with notifications. Evan sent 17 question marks, followed by "What engagement?" My mother-in-law Marjorie called 3 times in a row. Grant's sister Cheryl, who'd always believed her brother was too slick for his own good, simply texted, "I knew it." Meanwhile, I watched the cheaters notice. Their synchronized expressions of horror could have medaled at the Olympics of guilt. Grant's phone appeared in his hand faster than I'd ever seen him move. I declined his call with a swipe so satisfying it felt like therapy. Vanessa was also typing furiously, likely crafting a desperate message to her daughter explaining why she was snuggling up to her boyfriend's father in broad daylight. I stood, brushed off my slacks, and walked toward them, calm as a woman who had just burned her life down and found the fire oddly soothing. Grant's voice cracked like a teenager's. "This isn't what it looks like." "Oh, I'm sure it's not," I interrupted, savoring the way his Adam's apple jumped. "It never is it?" Vanessa attempted a look of concern, but Botox doesn't allow much movement. "Surely, we were just talking about the engagement party," she said, trying to recover. "I know," I replied sweetly. "That's what I told everyone. It's very touching how invested you both are in our children's future. So very involved." Before either of them could stammer a reply, my phone rang again. Lila calling. I answered on speaker. "Mrs. Caldwell, is Evan proposing to me?" Her voice trembled, equal parts panic and hope. "He's not answering, and my mom isn't either." "Oh, sweetheart," I said gently, locking eyes with Vanessa, whose golden tan had turned paper white. "Why don't you ask your mother? She's right here with me, and with your future father-in-law." I extended the phone toward Vanessa. She stared at it like it was a live explosive. "Lila, honey," she stammered. "There's been a misunderstanding." "Mom." Lila's voice sharpened. "What are you doing with Evan's dad? You said you were showing houses in Glastonbury today." Grant opened and closed his mouth like a stunned fish realizing the water had turned to air. "Well," I said pleasantly, ending the call, "looks like my tow truck just arrived. But don't worry, Grant. I've already unblocked our joint credit card, so you can order yourself a nice Uber home. Or perhaps Vanessa can offer you a lift. She seems very accommodating." Right on cue, the AA truck pulled up. The driver jumped out, clipboard in hand. I turned away from both wrecks, the car and the marriage, with a strange sense of lightness that only comes from one impulsive text detonating years of denial. By the time I climbed into the tow truck's passenger seat, my phone displayed 27 missed calls and 43 new messages. I silenced it, staring down at my wedding ring. The diamond caught the afternoon sun, scattering tiny rainbows across the dashboard. 19 years of marriage, 1 son away at college, a mortgage on our West Hartford Colonial, and a Labrador named Murphy still waiting at home for 2 owners who wouldn't be returning together tonight. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked. Applebee's on Farmington Avenue, I told the driver. I'm organizing a family meeting. As the tow truck pulled away, I caught Grant and Vanessa frozen in the side mirror, still rooted to the sidewalk like mannequins in shock. For nearly 2 decades I'd been the organized one, the planner who balanced the checkbook, kept the calendar, and made sure our life ran on time while Grant played the charming provider. But he had no idea that the same skills that made me efficient would also make me dangerously methodical when dismantling the life we built. I opened my banking app, scrolling through his recent transactions. $79 at a restaurant called Lame last Thursday, the same night he claimed to be entertaining clients. $312 at Tiffany & Company 3 days ago, and multiple charges at the Hartford Grand Hotel, conveniently located across from Oakmont Plaza. Checkmate, Grant, I murmured, screenshotting everything and sending it to my personal email, Exhibit A in what would soon become my divorce dossier. The driver glanced back at me. Rough day? I laughed. A sound just slightly unhinged. Let's just say I'm changing careers. From marketing manager to private investigator to divorce plaintiff, all before dinner. And the strangest part? I couldn't wait to see what came next. At Applebee's, the hostess blinked at me like I'd asked for reservations at a Michelin-star restaurant. Could I get a private table? I asked. Preferably somewhere good for emotional acoustics. We have a corner booth, she offered, clutching a laminated menu. Perfect, I said. I'll need seating for 6, unlimited mozzarella sticks. And your strongest non-alcoholic drink. I'm about to host the suburban version of a red wedding, less blood, more passive-aggressive commentary about who keeps the KitchenAid mixer. Sliding into the booth, I began laying out evidence like an attorney prepping for trial. Bank statements, screenshots, hotel receipts, all neatly categorized. Grant had never realized that our shared iPad synced everything through the cloud. For a financial advisor, he was shockingly bad at covering digital tracks. My phone rang. Evan. Mom, what's happening? Dad won't answer. Lila's crying. Grandma Marjorie keeps asking if she needs to buy a mother-of-the-groom dress. Honey, I said evenly, your father and Lila's mom have been playing a very adult version of 7 Minutes in Heaven repeatedly, from the look of it. There's no engagement party. That was just my creative way of revealing their little affair to everyone at once. Efficient, don't you think? Silence. Then cautiously, are you having a breakdown? Should I call someone? Already handled, I replied. I've invited your father, Lila, her mother, your Aunt Cheryl, and Grandma Marjorie here for a 5:30 summit. You should come too. I ordered those potato twisters you like. And sweetheart, this isn't a breakdown. It's a strategic demolition of 19 years of lies. With ranch dressing. Evan arrived first, still in his university sweatshirt, looking like someone who just discovered his parents were trending for all the wrong reasons. Mom, he said, sliding into the booth. Please tell me this is some kind of twisted joke. I handed him my phone, open to the gallery labeled Reasons Mommy and Daddy are getting divorced. He scrolled through the photos, his expression shifting from disbelief to disgust to that special teenage look that says, my parents are catastrophes in human form. Dad's been sleeping with Lila's mom, he muttered. For how long? Judging by the credit card history, at least 6 months, I said. Remember when he started wearing that cologne that smells like a lumberjack dipped in vanilla? That was your clue. Evan groaned, burying his face in his hands. This is going to destroy Lila. Actually, I said, sipping my virgin strawberry daiquiri, it's going to make Thanksgiving a lot less awkward. No more pretending to like Vanessa's turkey or her critiques of my cranberry sauce. The door opened and Lila entered. Eyes red, hair pulled back, heartbreak written across her face. She slid in beside Evan. Mrs. Caldwell, she began. Please, under the circumstances, call me Nora. Nora, she corrected softly. My mom says this is all a misunderstanding, that she and your husband were just making bad choices that got misinterpreted. Oh, that part's true, I said cheerfully, handing her a mozzarella stick. Eat. It helps. But they swear they weren't, Lila faltered. Auditioning for a reality show called Hartford's Most Shameless? I offered. Let's wait for them to arrive. Then we'll ask exactly what my husband's credit card was doing at the Hartford Grand Hotel 7 times last month. As if on cue, Grant and Vanessa walked in, followed closely by Cheryl, whose grin could barely contain her satisfaction. She'd waited 19 years for this. Where's Marjorie? I asked sweetly. Mom's on her way, Grant muttered, sliding into the booth with all the grace of a man heading to the gallows. Surely this isn't, he began. If you say not what it looks like, Grant, I will recite your credit card statement from memory, I said brightly, turning to the waitress. Could we get another round of mozzarella sticks? We're celebrating my husband's new title, Community Homewrecker of the Year. The waitress vanished faster than Grant's hairline did in his 30s. Vanessa cleared her throat. Surely this was just unfortunate timing. We were meeting to discuss real estate. Let me guess, I said. You were showing him properties with exceptionally sturdy bedroom furniture? Lila made a strangled sound. Evan stared down at the table like it might open up and swallow him. Mom, Grant hissed at Lila. Maybe we should talk privately. Oh no, I cut him off smoothly. If today has taught me anything, it's that privacy is overrated. Much like your vows. Cheryl snorted, earning daggers from both of them. I just want to understand, Lila whispered, her voice trembling. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice steady enough to cut glass. Before either of them could mumble a defense, I slid a manila folder across the table. According to my 20-minute investigation, conducted entirely through our shared accounts by the way, Grant, you might want to improve your password security. The timeline points to roughly 6 months, which, if I'm not mistaken, coincides perfectly with Vanessa's divorce from Michael being finalized in April. What an interesting overlap. Grant's face shifted from ghostly white to a furious red. You've been investigating me? No, I said coolly. I was planning our anniversary trip to Vermont. Of course I've been investigating you. What else was I supposed to do after catching you playing tongue twister with our son's girlfriend's mother? At that very moment, Marjorie made her grand entrance. For a petite woman, she somehow filled the entire Applebee's with her presence, striding toward the booth with the unstoppable force of someone who had raised 3 sons in the pre-internet era and survived to tell about it. Grant James Caldwell, she began, using all 3 names like a legal summons. Please tell me I didn't drive through West Hartford rush hour traffic just to find out you've been cheating on Nora. With? Her eyes narrowed as she looked at Vanessa. This woman? The same woman who mocked my daughter-in-law's cranberry sauce last Thanksgiving? The waitress, who'd been bravely approaching with a basket of mozzarella sticks, froze mid-step and quietly reversed course. And to think, I said, locking eyes with Grant, I spent 19 years defending your inability to hang up a towel, convincing myself it was endearing. Turns out, the towels were merely the opening act in the tragic opera that is your moral compass. The Applebee's manager appeared, clearly torn between customer service and self-preservation. Everything okay over here? He asked, glancing nervously at the pile of documents and my animated gestures. Absolutely, I said brightly. Just a casual family discussion about adultery, betrayal, and who gets custody of the Costco membership. And by the way, your mozzarella sticks are divine. He vanished faster than Grant's clients after the 2008 crash. Grant leaned in, voice dropping to that reassuring tone he used to close deals. Can we please discuss this like rational adults? Like the rational adults who use the joint credit card to book the same hotel room 7 times? I asked sweetly. That kind of rational? I turned to Marjorie. Did you know your son paid for a couple's massage at the Hartford Grand Spa last month, while I was visiting my sister in Providence? The couple, I might add, wasn't us. Marjorie stared at her son as though he were something unpleasant she'd scraped off her sensible Clarks. Grant James, I raised you better than this. Vanessa, who had remained silent until now, straightened up. This isn't entirely Grant's fault. I tilted my head. Oh? Did you trip and accidentally fall into an emotional entanglement? No, she said, her hair unmoving. But there's something you don't know. The table went still. Even Cheryl, who'd been gleefully treating this like dinner theater, paused mid-bite of her potato skin. Grant and I weren't just having an affair, Vanessa continued. We were planning to tell you both next week. We've decided to start a real estate investment company together. The hotel meetings were with potential investors. I blinked once, twice. So, you're saying it was both a business partnership and an affair? Double the betrayal for the same price? It's not like that, Grant protested. The business came first. And then what? I asked. You realize the partnership needed a physical component? Like a corporate trust exercise with significantly fewer clothes? Evan made a sound somewhere between a groan and a dying balloon. Lila looked at her mother as only teenage daughters can, pure blistering disappointment. Mom, she said softly, you told me you were showing houses when you were meeting Evan's dad. Technically, I was discussing houses, Vanessa mumbled. Oh my God, Lila whispered, turning to Evan. Our parents are worse than those real estate agents in that Netflix show who sleep with their clients. Selling Sunset, Cheryl offered helpfully. The business is real, Grant insisted, fumbling for his phone. It's called Caldwell Pierce Properties. We've already registered the LLC. And that was the moment clarity struck. A blinding epiphany so sharp it sliced through 19 years of deception. I began to laugh. Real uncontrollable laughter that made nearby diners glance over. Caldwell Pierce Properties? I repeated, wiping a tear. Tell me, Grant, did you register this LLC with our family attorney, Paul Steinberg? He nodded cautiously. The same Paul Steinberg who drafted our wills and knows about the prenuptial agreement your late father insisted we sign? Grant froze. What about it? The one that includes a very clear clause, I said, scrolling through my email. If either party is found guilty of infidelity, they forfeit their claim to all appreciated marital assets. Your father was old-fashioned that way, remember? He made us add it after your brother's divorce. Marjorie gasped. That clause is still in effect? It most certainly is, I replied. That's not enforceable, Grant said, his voice cracking as his confidence crumbled. It's archaic. Maybe, I said lightly. But Connecticut's an equitable distribution state. Judges here love penalizing adulterers who start LLCs with their mistresses using marital funds. For the first time all day, I felt something resembling peace control even. While Grant was busy building his future, I'd been inadvertently building the case that would end his. Grant, I continued calmly, did you register this business in both your names using our home address? You know, the one still jointly owned? His silence was answer enough. And Vanessa, I added, as a licensed real estate professional, did you assist him in that setup? Because that could look a lot like using professional expertise to misappropriate marital assets. Color drained from Vanessa's spray-tanned face. Mom, Evan asked carefully, what exactly are you saying? I smiled, stacking my papers neatly, my voice as calm as a verdict. I'm saying, sweetheart, that your father and Vanessa have not only destroyed their reputations, they've just handed me everything I need to walk away from this marriage richer, calmer, and legally bulletproof. That while your father believed he was being clever, he was, in reality, documenting his affair in triplicate and filing it neatly with the state of Connecticut. I stood, smoothing the front of my blazer. Now, if you'll all excuse me, I need to make a quick phone call. I've heard the law offices of Rachel Kim have an excellent reputation when it comes to high-asset divorces that involve thoroughly documented infidelity. My legs somehow carried me steadily toward the restrooms. Inside, I locked myself in a stall, leaned back against the cool door, and took 3 deep breaths. Then, for the first time all day, I did something that felt almost normal. I called my best friend. You will not believe the day I'm having, I whispered when Claire answered. 20 minutes later, and after one very productive phone call to Rachel Kim's office, I had an appointment scheduled for 2 o'clock the next afternoon. When I returned to the table, the scene had completely shifted. Grant sat slumped forward, looking as though he'd aged 10 years in under an hour. Vanessa was staring at her phone, her thumbs flying furiously across the screen. Marjorie had moved to sit beside me, her posture making it clear she had already chosen a side. Cheryl was speaking in low tones to Evan and Lila, occasionally pausing to throw sharp, accusatory looks at her brother. Did I miss anything? I asked as I slid back into the booth. Dad says they were going to tell us next week, Evan said flatly, after they secured funding for their first property. How thoughtful, I replied, sipping what was left of my watered-down virgin daiquiri. And what about the part where you both lied to your children for 6 months? That was wrong, Grant admitted, finally meeting my eyes. Nora, I know you're angry. Angry, I repeated, almost amused. When you leave the toilet seat up, I'm angry. When you shrink my cashmere sweater in the dryer, I'm angry. But finding out that you've been playing real estate mogul with Lila's mother, while simultaneously hiding assets from our marriage? That's not anger, Grant. That's clarity. At that moment, the waitress appeared with the check, sliding it onto the edge of the table from as far away as possible, clearly wanting no part of the explosion still in progress. Oh, Grant will be taking care of that, I said cheerfully. Won't you, dear? Think of it as your first alimony payment. 2 weeks later, I sat across from Rachel Kim in her sleek downtown Hartford office, watching her perfectly manicured fingers glide over Grant's financial records on a tablet. So, Rachel said at last, looking up with the sharp smile of a shark that had just scented blood in the water. Not only did your husband register an LLC with his mistress using your marital address, but he also opened a separate business account funded by transfers from your joint savings. And he did all this while still bound by a prenuptial agreement with an infidelity clause. Grant's always been an overachiever, I said dryly. Why settle for a simple affair when you can commit financial infidelity at the same time? Rachel chuckled. In my 15 years as a divorce attorney, I've seen some remarkable acts of self-sabotage, but your husband may actually win the prize for documenting his own downfall this thoroughly. I took a sip of the excellent coffee her assistant had brought in. So what happens next? Now, Rachel replied, leaning back in her chair, we send their shiny little business straight into the hands of a Connecticut family court judge who happens to hold very traditional views on marriage. Judge Whitmore lost his first wife to his business partner 30 years ago. Let's just say he has lingering opinions. The universe did, it seemed, have a wicked sense of humor. Since that unforgettable Tuesday at Applebee's, my life had transformed into something resembling an alternate reality. I had become the most discussed topic in our social circle. Grant had moved into a sad little extended-stay hotel near his office. Vanessa, according to Lila, who was still dating Evan somehow, had been placed on probation by her real estate brokerage for ethical concerns, after word of their business venture spread. Meanwhile, I'd uncovered talents I never knew I had. Like tracking down every investor they had approached and introducing myself as the soon-to-be ex-wife who legally owned half of everything they were attempting to sell. It was fascinating how quickly potential investors lost enthusiasm once they realized they might be purchasing a lawsuit along with their investment shares. We have the upper hand, Rachel continued, flipping through another folder, but we need to move quickly. The initial hearing is scheduled for next Monday at 10 o'clock. Just then my phone buzzed with a text from Marjorie. Darling, confirming lunch tomorrow. Also, Grant called, something about wanting to be reasonable. I told him he should have thought about reasonable before he started using your Amex points for hotel stays with that bottle blonde homewrecker. I smiled. Having one's mother-in-law defect to your side during a divorce was like gaining a seasoned general who came armed with all the enemy's battle plans. Rachel, I said, what do you think about offering a settlement? One that, of course, heavily favors me. Normally, she replied, I'd say we take him for everything. But a quick settlement could save you months of stress and legal fees. What are you proposing? I outlined my plan. When I finished, Rachel's eyes gleamed with something between admiration and amusement. Mrs. Caldwell, she said, you missed your calling as a divorce attorney. I spent 19 years married to a financial advisor, I replied. You learn a thing or two about leverage. 2 days later, we sat in a conference room at Rachel's office, Grant, his anxious young lawyer, and me. The poor man kept glancing at Rachel as though she might bite him, and frankly, that wasn't far from the truth. Let's be clear, Rachel began, her tone cool and firm. We have documented evidence of infidelity, misused marital funds, and attempted financial diversion. In Connecticut, that's what we call the trifecta of you're completely doomed in court. Grant's lawyer cleared his throat nervously. My client is prepared to offer a fair division of. We're not here for your offer, I interrupted smoothly. We're here for your acceptance of ours. Rachel slid the proposal across the table. I watched Grant's expression shift from confusion to shock to outrage, and finally to the grim realization that he had absolutely no leverage left. "This is highway robbery," he sputtered. "You want the house, 70% of our investments, full ownership of my retirement accounts, and the Subaru? The Subaru that broke down and started all this? It seems poetic, doesn't it?" I said lightly. "Consider it karma, with a warranty." Grant's voice rose. "And what exactly am I supposed to get out of this?" "Freedom," Rachel replied smoothly. "Freedom from the consequences of that prenuptial clause you violated. And Mrs. Caldwell is being remarkably generous. She's letting you keep your clothes, your golf clubs, and whatever business contacts haven't already fled your partnership with Miss Pierce." Grant turned to me, desperation softening his voice. "Nora, we were together 19 years. Doesn't that count for something?" "It counted for everything," I said quietly. "That's why I'm letting you keep Murphy every other weekend. Our dog still loves you, Grant. Which is more than I can say for me." Later that evening, over dinner at the Cheesecake Factory, Evan's choice, not mine, I relayed the entire outcome. He looked at me over his plate of fries. "So you won." I smiled, raising my glass. "Let's just say your father lost efficiently." Apparently, emotional trauma calls for oversized portions and a 14-page menu. Evan shook his head in disbelief. "So Dad basically has to start over. At 45 he'll survive," I assured him, spearing a piece of avocado egg roll. "The settlement allows him to keep his job and his client list. He just no longer has access to the fruits of our labor, the ones he was so eager to share with Vanessa." Evan frowned. "Lila told me they've dissolved their business partnership. Apparently, no investor will go near them now." "How tragic," I said, not even trying to hide my smile. Who could have imagined that a business built on deceit might struggle with trust issues? "Mom, you didn't," he said slowly. "I may have sent a few emails," I admitted, feigning innocence. "Just polite introductions. I simply let potential investors know I'm the legal co-owner of half their proposed assets. Pure courtesy." Evan looked torn between horror and reluctant admiration. "Remind me never to cross you." "That's wise," I said, patting his hand. "I raised a smart boy." "Speaking of Lila," I asked, "how are things between you two?" "Weird but okay," he replied. "We've bonded over having the most embarrassing parents in Connecticut. She's coming over later. We're thinking of starting a support group. Maybe call it Surviving Family Merger Disasters. My parents tried to become the Brady Bunch." By the time we finished dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from Grant. "Sign the papers. Rachel will file tomorrow. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. 19 years of marriage, reduced to a text message apology." When I got home, I walked through the house that was now officially mine alone. I poured myself a glass of the expensive Cabernet Grant had been saving for a special occasion, kicked off my shoes and sank into the couch. Murphy jumped up beside me, resting his head in my lap with a soft sigh. "It's just us now, Coop," I murmured, scratching behind his ears. "Well, except for the weekends when you'll have to pretend you're thrilled to see your father, while he feeds you those awful processed treats." My phone buzzed again. A message from Claire. "Divorce papers filed. Time to celebrate. The girls and I are taking you out Saturday, no excuses." Attached was a photo of a cocktail menu from Hartford's newest rooftop bar. The words Nora's Freedom Tour scrawled across the top in Claire's familiar loopy handwriting. I took another sip of Grant's special occasion wine. It tasted like victory. Slightly bitter, unexpectedly complex, but deeply satisfying. 6 months after my Subaru's heroic death exposed my husband's affair, I found myself on my patio, yes, my patio, hosting what I proudly called my Reclaiming My Life barbecue. The spring air was soft and warm. Murphy chased butterflies across the freshly landscaped yard, courtesy of the gardener I could now afford, thanks to no longer funding Grant's hotel rendezvous. My friends were scattered across the lawn, sipping wine I hadn't needed to justify buying. "To Nora," Claire announced, raising her glass. "The woman who turned lemons into a margarita, garnished it with her ex-husband's tears, and is now serving it at her own victory party." Everyone cheered. Even Evan and Lila, who had somehow managed to salvage their relationship despite their parents' combined efforts to make family gatherings permanently awkward. Speech, demanded Marjorie, who had flown in from her new condo in Florida just for the occasion. Apparently, watching her son's marriage implode had inspired her to pursue her dream of retiring somewhere she could wear flip-flops in February. I stood, feeling surprisingly steady for someone 3 glasses into a Sunday afternoon. 6 months ago, I began. I thought my life was ending when my car broke down outside Oakmont Plaza. Turns out it was just beginning. I looked around at the faces of the people who had carried me through the darkest winter of my life. They say when one door closes, another opens. What they don't mention is that sometimes you have to slam the first one so hard the whole house shakes. And change the locks, added Cheryl, who had proudly appointed herself my personal divorce cheerleader. The interesting thing about betrayal, I continued swirling my wine, is how it forces you to confront who you really are. For 19 years I was Grant's wife, Evan's mother, the woman who remembered to buy toilet paper and schedule chimney cleanings. I was so busy maintaining our life that I forgot to have my own. I gestured toward the newly painted blue front door, a color Grant had always vetoed as too coastal for our traditional colonial. Now I'm just Nora, I said. Nora who painted her door Mediterranean blue because she wanted to. Nora who booked a solo trip to Portugal for her birthday. Nora who finally took those ceramics classes she's been talking about since 2015. Nora who crushed her ex-husband in divorce court. Well, yes, Claire interjected with a grin. That too. I laughed. But strangely, that's not the victory that matters most. I looked at Evan, who was watching me with a mix of pride and mild embarrassment, the universal expression of children witnessing their parents' emotional speeches. The real win wasn't the house or the investments, I said. It was realizing that I'm actually pretty good at handling chaos, and that I make better financial decisions than my certified financial advisor ex-husband. Which is both ironic and incredibly satisfying. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a new text from Grant. Murphy left his heart medication at my place. I'll drop it off tomorrow. Grant was now living in a modest condo across town, driving a used Hyundai, and dating a pharmaceutical sales rep named Hannah, who, according to Evan's reluctant intel, was actually quite nice and thankfully, didn't criticize anyone's cranberry sauce. Vanessa, however, had not been so fortunate. Her real estate broker had quietly suggested she move to another agency, citing reputational concerns. Vanessa had relocated to Glastonbury to restart her career, which conveniently placed her in a different school district, far from the mothers who now referred to her as the home wrecker. And not, of course, because of her skill with a sledgehammer during home renovations. Lila had forgiven her mother, though only with the kind of conditional teenage forgiveness that comes wrapped in reminders. Remember when you almost ruined my relationship by sleeping with my boyfriend's father? Had apparently become Lila's favorite line whenever Vanessa asked her to clean her room. I raised my glass again. I've learned a few things over these past 6 months, I said. First, always check your joint credit card statements. Second, prenups are worth their weight in gold. And third, nothing clarifies life quite like watching your husband walk out of a hotel with your son's girlfriend's mother. To clarity, Marjorie declared, lifting her own glass with the enthusiasm of someone who had also discovered freedom after decades of polite endurance. Later, as the party wound down and guests left with leftover cupcakes and slightly tipsy hugs, Evan stayed behind to help me clean up. You're different now, Mom, he said, rinsing a wine glass. Different bad or different good? I asked. Different good, he decided after a moment. You laugh more. Even when you were mad at Dad, you seemed, I don't know, more alive. Turns out righteous indignation is surprisingly energizing, I said, nudging his hip with mine. And how are things with you and Lila? Still surviving the parental disaster? We're calling it an elaborate stress test for our relationship, he said, grinning. If we can survive family dinners where her mom once dated my dad, we can survive anything. That's a healthy perspective. Plus, he added with a smirk, it makes for a killer college essay. How I survived my parents' midlife crisis and found inner strength. As Evan headed back to campus that evening, I carried a final glass of wine out to the patio and sank into my chair beside Murphy. The sunset streaked the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. A watercolor ending to a day that felt significant in quiet, unexpected ways. My phone buzzed with a notification. A memory from exactly 1 year ago. It was a photo of Grant and me at some charity gala, smiling with the practiced ease of a long-married couple. I barely recognized that woman, the careful makeup, the cautious smile, the exhaustion hidden behind perfect posture. "Here's to automotive failure," I said softly to the empty garden. The unexpected catalyst for finding myself again at 42. Murphy gave a small approving woof, loyal as ever to whoever was currently holding the cheese. Life 2.0, as Claire liked to call it, was proving to be quite the upgrade. Not entirely bug-free perhaps, but full of new features I hadn't known I needed until they were mine.